The stagecoach lurched to a stop in Hamilton, Nevada, and Beatrice Camden pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window, watching her breath fog the glass as the December wind howled like a wounded animal across the desolate landscape. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston to marry a man she had never met, carrying nothing but a worn carpetbag and a faded daguerreotype of someone who called himself her future husband. And now, standing on the platform in her thin traveling dress, she realized the photograph had been a lie. The man who was supposed to meet her never came. 3 hours she waited at that station, watching the sun sink lower behind the mountains while the temperature dropped and the wind picked up, cutting through her inadequate coat like knives made of ice. The station master, an elderly gentleman with kind eyes, had tried to convince her to wait inside, but she refused, terrified she might miss him, that this whole journey would be for nothing. When the last of the daylight faded and the lamplighters began their rounds, he finally convinced her to come into the warm station office, where he made inquiries on her behalf. The news came swift and brutal. The man whose letters had promised her a new life, whose words had painted pictures of a prosperous ranch and a comfortable home, had died 3 weeks prior in a gambling dispute. No one had thought to inform his mail-order bride back east. The station master delivered this information with sympathy, but it changed nothing about her circumstances. She had no money for return passage. She had no family to wire for help. Her father had passed 2 years ago, her mother the year before that, and she had sold everything she owned to pay for this journey west. Beatrice stood there in that small office, the reality of her situation crashing over her like an avalanche. She was alone, stranded in a rough mining town in the middle of winter, with nowhere to go and no prospects. The station master offered what comfort he could, mentioning that the boarding house down the street might have work, that perhaps she could find employment somehow. But his eyes told her what his words would not. Hamilton was a town of men, miners and gamblers and roughnecks, and a woman alone here was in constant danger. She thanked him for his kindness and stepped back out into the December wind, her tears coming unbidden and freezing on her cheeks almost instantly. The cold was unlike anything she had experienced in Boston. This was a savage, merciless cold that seemed to reach into her very bones and squeeze. She wrapped her arms around herself and began walking, not knowing where she was going, just needing to move, needing to think, needing to figure out how she had ended up here in this impossible situation. The main street of Hamilton stretched before her, lined with false-fronted buildings that groaned in the wind. Yellow lamplights spilled from saloon windows, and she could hear piano music and raucous laughter from within. She kept her head down and walked quickly, aware of the eyes that followed her progress. A woman alone on these streets after dark was asking for trouble, but she had nowhere else to go. She made it perhaps 2 blocks before her legs gave out. The journey had been long, and she had not eaten since morning. The cold and the shock and the sheer weight of her despair pulled her down onto a wooden bench outside a shuttered general store. She sat there and let the tears come freely, no longer caring that they froze, no longer caring about anything. That was when she heard the footsteps, slow and measured, boots on boardwalk. She looked up through her tears and saw a man approaching, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy sheepskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind. He stopped a few feet away, and in the dim light from a nearby window, she could see his face. He was young, perhaps in his late 20s, with strong features weathered by sun and wind, dark hair that brushed his collar, and eyes that held unexpected gentleness. "Madam," he said, his voice a low rumble that somehow carried over the howling wind, "you should not be out here." I have nowhere else to be, Beatrice heard herself say, her voice breaking on the words. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her Eastern dress, her carpet bag, the ice crystals forming on her eyelashes. You are the mail-order bride, he said, and it was not a question. The one for Samuel Pritchard. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. I heard what happened, the man said quietly. I am sorry. Samuel was not a good man, but you did not deserve to come all this way for nothing. What am I going to do? The words came out as barely more than a whisper. The man glanced up and down the street, then back at her. Tears freeze in this wind, he said. Let me warm you. My ranch is an hour's ride from here. You can stay there tonight, somewhere safe, and in the morning we will figure out what to do. Beatrice knew she should refuse. Every rule of propriety she had been raised with screamed that going anywhere with a strange man was madness. But as she sat there on that bench, feeling the life slowly freezing out of her, she realized that propriety was a luxury she could no longer afford. This man could be a scoundrel or worse, but if she stayed here, she would either freeze to death or fall victim to someone far worse than any potential scoundrel. I do not even know your name, she said. Nathan Garrett, he replied, tipping his hat slightly. I run a cattle ranch in the hills north of here. I came to town for supplies and heard about your situation from the station master. He is a friend of mine. She studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or ill intent, but found only honest concern. There was something steady about him, something solid and dependable that called to a part of her she had not known existed until this moment. Beatrice Camden, she said, rising on shaky legs. And I accept your offer, Mr. Garrett, because I have no other choice. Sometimes no choice is the same as the right choice, Nathan said. He picked up her carpet bag without asking permission, then offered her his arm. My wagon is at the livery. We should go before the storm gets worse. She took his arm, feeling the solid strength beneath the sheepskin, and let him guide her through the darkening streets. The wind pushed against them like a living thing, trying to drive them back, but Nathan moved forward with the certainty of a man who had weathered many such storms. They reached the livery stable, where a covered wagon waited, hitched to two sturdy horses that stamped and snorted in the cold. Nathan helped her up onto the wagon seat, then tucked heavy blankets around her before climbing up beside her. He took up the reins and clicked his tongue, and the horses lurched forward, carrying them out of Hamilton and into the darkness beyond. The ride was brutal. The wind seemed to grow stronger as they left the protection of the town, howling across the open land with nothing to stop it. Snow began to fall, not the gentle flakes Beatrice remembered from Boston winters, but hard pellets of ice that stung exposed skin. She huddled under the blankets, shivering despite their weight, while Nathan drove on with his hat pulled low and his shoulders hunched against the storm. He did not try to make conversation during that long hour, and she was grateful. She used the time to try to come to terms with her situation, to accept that the life she had imagined for herself was gone before it had even begun. Samuel Pritchard's letters had promised her security, a home, a purpose. They had been carefully written, each one painting a picture of a life she could build in the West. She had allowed herself to hope, to dream of something better than the poverty that had claimed her after her parents' deaths. Now those dreams lay shattered, and she was once again adrift in a world that had no place for women without family or fortune. The only difference was that now she was adrift in a frozen wasteland instead of the crowded streets of Boston. The ranch house appeared out of the darkness like a miracle, a solid structure of wood and stone with smoke rising from the chimney. Nathan drove the wagon straight to the barn, where he quickly unhitched the horses and led them inside. Beatrice climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff and aching from the cold, and waited while he secured the animals and gathered her bag. "The house is warmer," he said, gesturing toward the building. "Come on." She followed him across the yard, the snow crunching under her feet, and up onto a wide porch. He opened the door and ushered her inside, and the warmth hit her like a physical force. She stood in the entry, swaying slightly as the heat began to thaw her frozen limbs. The sensation was almost painful, pins and needles spreading through her hands and feet. Nathan closed the door behind them, shutting out the wind and the cold, then moved past her to stir up the fire in the large stone fireplace that dominated one wall of the main room. Beatrice looked around, taking in her surroundings. The house was simple but well built, with sturdy furniture and clean floors. It was clearly a bachelor's dwelling, lacking the soft touches a woman might add, but it was comfortable and warm and safe. "Sit by the fire," Nathan said, pulling a chair closer to the hearth. "You need to warm up slowly or you will make yourself sick." She did as he suggested, sinking into the chair and holding her hands toward the flames. Nathan disappeared into what she assumed was the kitchen and returned a few minutes later with a cup of something hot. "Coffee," he said, pressing it into her hands. "Drink it slowly." The coffee was strong and bitter, but it was hot, and she sipped it gratefully, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. Nathan pulled another chair close and sat down, studying her with those calm, steady eyes. "Thank you," Beatrice said finally. "You did not have to help me." "Yes, I did," Nathan replied simply. "What kind of man would I be if I left you to freeze on that street?" "Most men would not have even noticed," she said, thinking of the faces she had seen in those saloon windows, the indifferent or calculating looks from the men on the street. "Then most men are fools," Nathan said. He leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "What were you planning to do, before you found out about Samuel?" "I was going to marry him," Beatrice said. "Start a new life out here. I had no future in Boston. My parents left me nothing but debts, and I had no skills that would earn me a living wage. When I saw Mr. Pritchard's advertisement for a bride, it seemed like the answer to my prayers." "Samuel Pritchard was a drunk and a gambler," Nathan said bluntly. "He went through 3 wives before you. The first one left him, the second died of fever, and the third had the good sense to run off with a traveling salesman. You are better off without him, even if that does not help your current situation." Beatrice felt something cold settle in her stomach. "He never mentioned previous wives in his letters." "I am sure he did not mention a lot of things," Nathan said. "He was good at painting pretty pictures with words. That is how he got people to invest in his schemes. The ranch he wrote about probably did not exist." "I have been such a fool," Beatrice whispered, staring into her coffee cup. "You have been desperate," Nathan corrected. "That is different. Desperate people make choices they would not otherwise make because they have no other options." She looked up at him, this stranger who had shown her more kindness in one evening than she had experienced in months. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Garrett? What do you gain from this?" "Nothing," he said. "And call me Nathan. We are past formalities now, I think." "Then call me Beatrice," she replied. "Or B, if you prefer." He nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. "B it is, then, and I am helping you because it is the right thing to do. My mother raised me to believe that we have an obligation to help those in need when we have the means to do so. I have a warm house and food and space. You have nothing. The arithmetic is simple." "Your mother must be a remarkable woman," Beatrice said. The smile faded from Nathan's face. "She was. She died 5 years ago along with my father. Influenza took them both within a week of each other. That is when I inherited this ranch such as it is." "I am sorry for your loss," Beatrice said softly. "I know what it is like to lose your parents." "Then we have that in common," Nathan said. He stood up, moving to the fireplace to add another log. "You must be hungry." "I am not much of a cook, but I can put together something edible." "You do not have to trouble yourself," Beatrice protested. "You have already done so much." "It is no trouble," Nathan insisted. "Besides, I need to eat too. Just stay here and warm up. I will call you when it is ready." He disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Beatrice alone with her thoughts. She sipped her coffee and stared into the fire, trying to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. This morning she had been on a stagecoach, nervous but hopeful about her future. Now she was sitting in a stranger's house, her plans in ruins, her future once again uncertain. But despite the uncertainty, despite the fear and the disappointment, she felt something else too. A tiny spark of hope, fragile as a candle flame in the wind. Nathan Garrett had shown her kindness without expecting anything in return. He had taken her to safety and promised to help her figure out what came next. In a world that had been consistently cruel to her, that small act of decency meant everything. She could hear him moving around in the kitchen, the clatter of pots and pans, and she found the sounds oddly comforting. It had been a long time since she had been in a home where someone was cooking dinner, where life proceeded with ordinary domestic rhythms. After her mother died, she had lived in a series of increasingly shabby boarding houses, working whatever job she could find, always one step ahead of complete destitution. This felt different. This felt, for the moment at least, like safety. Nathan emerged about 20 minutes later carrying 2 plates loaded with fried potatoes, beans, and thick slices of bread. "Nothing fancy," he said, handing her a plate and a fork, "but it will fill you up." They ate in companionable silence, sitting by the fire while the wind howled outside. The food was simple but good, and Beatrice realized she was ravenous. She had not had a proper meal in days, living on the stale bread and hard cheese she had bought for the journey. "That was wonderful," she said when she finished, setting her plate aside. "Thank you." "My cooking never gets called wonderful," Nathan said with a chuckle, "but I am glad you enjoyed it." He collected their plates and stood. "I will show you where you can sleep. The house has 2 bedrooms. You will take the larger one. I will sleep in my father's old room." "I cannot take your room," Beatrice protested. "You can and you will," Nathan said firmly. "The bed is more comfortable and you need rest after the journey you have had. No arguments." He led her down a short hallway to a bedroom that was indeed larger and more comfortable looking than she had expected. The bed was covered with a thick quilt, and there was a dresser and a washstand with a basin and pitcher. "I will bring you some water so you can wash up," Nathan said. "The outhouse is behind the main house, but there is a chamber pot under the bed if you need it during the night. Are you warm enough, or do you need more blankets?" "I am warm enough," Beatrice assured him. "Thank you, Nathan, for everything." He nodded, his expression serious. "Get some rest. We will talk more in the morning about what options you have." He paused at the doorway, then turned back. "And B, you are safe here. I want you to know that. I will not touch you or bother you in any way. You have my word." "I believe you," she said, and she realized she meant it. After he left, bringing her a pitcher of warm water before bidding her good night, Beatrice washed her face and hands and changed into her nightdress. She climbed into the bed, which was indeed wonderfully comfortable, and pulled the heavy quilt up to her chin. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but here in this room, in this house, she was warm and safe. For the first time since leaving Boston, Beatrice allowed herself to hope that perhaps things might work out after all. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, winter sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was. Then the memories of the previous day came flooding back. She sat up, pushing her hair out of her face, and saw that someone had left a dress draped over the chair by the dresser. It was simple, made of sturdy brown wool, clearly well worn but clean and mended. Beatrice climbed out of bed and examined the dress. It would be too large for her, but it would be warmer than her thin traveling dress. She washed up and put it on, having to roll up the sleeves and cinch the waist with her own belt to make it fit. When she looked at herself in the small mirror above the dresser, she saw a stranger looking back. The fine lady from Boston was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she belonged in the West. She found Nathan in the kitchen, standing at the stove and tending a pan of bacon and eggs. He looked up when she entered and nodded approval at the dress. "My mother's," he said. "I kept some of her things, could not bring myself to get rid of them. I thought it might fit you better than it fits me." Beatrice smiled despite herself. "It is much warmer than what I was wearing, thank you." "Breakfast is almost ready," Nathan said. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," she admitted. "Your bed is very comfortable." "Good," he said simply. He dished up eggs and bacon onto 2 plates and brought them to the table along with the coffee pot and cups. "Sit. Eat. We have things to discuss." They ate their breakfast while Nathan outlined the situation as he saw it. Hamilton was not a place for a woman alone, especially not in winter. The boarding house he had mentioned might have worked, but it would be hard and the pay would be poor. The other options were even less appealing. "You could try to find another position as a mail-order bride," Nathan said carefully. "There are always men looking for wives out here, but after what happened with Samuel, I do not know if that is a risk you want to take again." "No," Beatrice said firmly. "I will not put myself in that position again. I would rather face whatever hardship comes than gamble on another man's false promises." Nathan nodded as if he had expected that answer. "Then that leaves limited options. You could try to find work in town, though as I said, the prospects are not good. Or—" he hesitated, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Or," Beatrice prompted. "Or you could stay here," Nathan said. "I could use the help around the ranch, cooking, cleaning, mending. The work I've been doing myself, but not doing well. I could pay you a wage and you would have a safe place to stay until you figured out what you wanted to do next." Beatrice stared at him. "You would hire me as your housekeeper?" "Yes," Nathan said, "if you are willing. I know it is not what you came west for, but it would give you time and breathing room to make a real plan, not just desperate choices." "What would people say?" Beatrice asked. "An unmarried woman living in a bachelor's house." "We are far enough from town that it does not matter much what people say," Nathan replied. "But if it concerns you, we could spread the word that you are my cousin or my sister, some relative who came west to keep house for me. No one would question it too closely." Beatrice considered the offer. It was sensible, even generous. She would have work, a wage, safety, and time to figure out her future. And Nathan had proven himself to be honorable. He had kept his word the previous night, had not bothered her, had treated her with nothing but respect. But there was something else too, something she was almost afraid to acknowledge. She liked him. In the brief time she had known him, she had found Nathan Garrett to be kind, steady, and honest. There was a quiet strength about him that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father was alive. And when she looked at him, she felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude or relief. "I accept," she said. "And thank you, Nathan. This is more kindness than I had any right to expect." "You have every right to expect kindness," Nathan said. "The world should be full of it. That it is not is a failing of the world, not of you." They spent the rest of that day establishing the new routine. Nathan showed her around the ranch, which consisted of the main house, the barn, a chicken coop, and several outbuildings. He ran cattle on the surrounding land. He explained about 200 head at last count. though the harsh winter had likely taken a toll on the herd. He also had a few horses, chickens for eggs, and a milk cow named Bessie. "It is not a large operation," Nathan said as they walked, "but it is mine, and it provides enough to live on comfortably if you are not extravagant." "It seems wonderful to me," Beatrice said, and she meant it. After months of uncertainty and poverty, the simple abundance of the ranch was almost overwhelming. Fresh eggs every morning, milk from the cow, vegetables stored in the root cellar for winter, meat from the cattle when needed. It was more security than she had known in years. Over the following days, they fell into a comfortable rhythm. Beatrice took over the household tasks, discovering that she enjoyed the work far more than she had expected. There was satisfaction in keeping the house clean and orderly, in preparing hot meals, in mending Nathan's worn shirts and socks. It was honest work, and she was good at it. Nathan, for his part, spent his days tending to the ranch. He checked on the cattle, repaired fences, chopped wood, and performed the 100 other tasks required to keep a ranch running through a harsh Nevada winter. He would come in at midday for lunch and again in the evening for dinner, always grateful for the hot food and the warm fire. They talked during those meals, slowly learning about each other. Nathan told her about growing up on the ranch, about his parents who had homesteaded this land when Nevada was barely settled. He spoke of learning to ride and rope, of harsh winters and dry summers, of the constant battle to make a living from this unforgiving land. Beatrice told him about Boston, about her childhood in a modest but comfortable home, about her father's business failure and her mother's slow decline into illness and death. She spoke of the struggle to survive after their deaths, the jobs she had taken, the growing desperation that had finally led her to answer Samuel Pritchard's advertisement. "I thought I would come west and find a new beginning," she said one evening as they sat by the fire after dinner. "I suppose I did, just not the way I expected." "Sometimes the best things come in unexpected ways," Nathan said quietly. "Do you ever think about marrying?" Beatrice asked, then immediately felt her face flush. "I am sorry. That was too personal." "It is all right," Nathan said. He stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. "I used to think about it. Before my parents died, I even courted a girl in town, Sarah Mitchell. We had an understanding, or I thought we did. But after my parents passed and I inherited the ranch, she decided I was not good enough. She wanted someone with more prospects, someone who did not smell like cattle and work from dawn until dark just to scrape by." "Then she was a fool," Beatrice said with surprising vehemence. Nathan looked at her, one eyebrow raised. "You think so?" "I know so," Beatrice said. "You are one of the kindest, most honorable men I have ever met. Any woman would be lucky to have you." "Even you?" Nathan asked, and there was something in his voice that made her heart skip. "Especially me," Beatrice said softly. The air between them seemed to shimmer with sudden tension. Nathan leaned forward slightly, his eyes searching her face, and Beatrice found herself holding her breath. But then he seemed to catch himself, leaning back and looking away. "It is late," he said, his voice rough. "We should get some rest." Beatrice nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. She bid him good night and retreated to her room, but sleep was a long time coming. She lay in the dark, listening to the wind and thinking about the look in Nathan's eyes, the way her heart had raced when he had asked that question. She was falling in love with him. The realization came with startling clarity. Somewhere in the past week, between the shared meals and quiet conversations and moments of simple domestic companionship, she had fallen in love with Nathan Garrett. It was nothing like what she had imagined love would be. There was no courtship, no poetry, no grand gestures. Just the steady presence of a good man, the comfort of his company, the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention. But what did he feel? He had rescued her, given her work and shelter, treated her with kindness and respect. But did he feel anything more than responsibility? The question kept her awake long into the night. December turned to January, and the winter deepened its grip on the land. Snow fell regularly, piling in drifts around the ranch buildings. Nathan spent more time in the house, unable to ride out to check on the cattle in the worst weather. Those days trapped inside by the storms were both wonderful and torturous for Beatrice. She loved having him near, loved the sound of his voice and the rare occasions when he laughed at something she said. But the proximity also heightened her awareness of him, made her long for something she could not quite name. One evening, a particularly fierce storm raged outside, the wind so strong it rattled the windows and made the walls creak. They had finished dinner and were sitting by the fire as usual, Beatrice mending one of Nathan's shirts while he worked on repairing a saddle strap. The companionable silence that usually felt so comfortable now seemed charged with something unspoken. "Bea," Nathan said suddenly, setting aside his work, "I need to tell you something." She looked up, her heart suddenly pounding. "What is it?" "I have been thinking," he said, not quite meeting her eyes, "about your situation, about the arrangement we made." Beatrice felt something cold settle in her stomach. Was he going to ask her to leave? Had she done something wrong? "Yes. It has been more than a month now," Nathan continued. "And I realized that what I proposed was only meant to be temporary, a way to give you time to figure out what you wanted to do next. But I find myself hoping that you might want to stay longer. Maybe permanently." "Permanently," Beatrice echoed, barely daring to hope. "As my wife," Nathan said, finally looking directly at her. "I know this is sudden, and I know you came west running from one marriage arrangement into another, and I have no right to ask this of you. But the truth is, Bea, I have grown to care for you, more than care for you. These past weeks with you here have been the happiest I have been since before my parents died. You make this house feel like a home. You make me feel like I am more than just a rancher barely scraping by. And I think that maybe, if I am reading the signs right, you might feel something for me too." Beatrice set down her mending with trembling hands. "You want to marry me?" "I do," Nathan said. "But not out of obligation or convenience. I want to marry you because I love you, Bea. I think I started loving you that first night, when you were sitting on that bench crying and you looked up at me with such desperation and hope mixed together. And I have fallen more in love with you every day since." "Nathan," Beatrice whispered, her eyes filling with tears, "I love you too. I was so afraid you only saw me as a responsibility, someone you had to help out of duty." "Never," Nathan said fiercely. He crossed the space between them and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "You are not a responsibility. You are a blessing. The best thing that has ever happened to me, even if you did come into my life in the strangest way possible." Beatrice laughed through her tears. "I came to Nevada to marry a stranger and ended up loving a different stranger entirely. Not so strange anymore, I hope," Nathan said with a smile. "Not strange at all," Beatrice agreed. She reached out and touched his face, feeling the roughness of his beard against her palm. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you, not because I have no other choice, but because I choose you, because you are everything I never knew I wanted." Nathan pulled her down from the chair and kissed her, and it was like coming home. His lips were warm and gentle, and she felt something in her chest expand and fill with light. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Not desperate bargaining or pragmatic arrangements, but this perfect sense of rightness, of two people finding each other against all odds. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "We will do this right," he said. I will ride into Hamilton tomorrow and speak to the preacher. We can be married by the end of the week if the weather holds." "I do not care if it takes a month," Beatrice said. "I am not going anywhere." "Good," Nathan said, "because I am never letting you go." They sat together by the fire long into the night, making plans and dreaming about their future. Nathan talked about expanding the ranch, maybe buying more cattle in the spring. Beatrice talked about planting a garden when the weather warmed, about making curtains for the windows and maybe painting the bedroom. They were simple dreams, domestic dreams, but they were theirs, and they were real. Nathan did ride to Hamilton 3 days later when the weather cleared, and he returned with the news that the preacher would perform the ceremony on Sunday. He also brought fabric for a dress, insisting that Beatrice should have something new to be married in, even if it was just simple calico. Beatrice spent the next few days sewing the dress, her fingers flying over the seams. She had not felt this kind of joy in so long that it almost frightened her. What if something went wrong? What if this happiness was snatched away like everything else good in her life had been? But Nathan seemed to sense her fears. He would find excuses to come in from his work, would squeeze her shoulder as he passed or drop a kiss on top of her head. "Stop worrying," he told her more than once. "This is real. We are real. Nothing is going to take this away from us." Sunday dawned clear and cold, the sky a brilliant blue that seemed to stretch forever. Nathan hitched up the wagon, and they rode into Hamilton together, Beatrice wearing her new calico dress with Nathan's mother's shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Nathan wore his Sunday clothes, looking uncomfortable in the starched collar, but handsome as any man Beatrice had ever seen. The preacher met them at the small church on the edge of town, along with the station master and his wife, whom Nathan had asked to stand as witnesses. The ceremony was simple and quick, just the essential words spoken in that small wooden building with the winter sun streaming through the windows. But when Nathan slipped a simple gold band on her finger and kissed her to seal their vows, Beatrice felt her entire world shift and settle into place. She was married. She was Mrs. Nathan Garrett. She had a husband who loved her, a home that was truly hers, and a future that stretched before her full of possibility. They celebrated with a simple meal at the hotel dining room, the station master and his wife joining them and offering their congratulations and well wishes. Then Nathan and Beatrice climbed back into the wagon and headed home to the ranch to begin their new life together. That night, lying in Nathan's arms in the bed they now shared, Beatrice thought back to that December evening when she had sat on a bench in Hamilton, crying in the freezing wind and certain her life was over. She had been so wrong. Her life had not ended that night. It had been waiting to begin. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "About how strange life is," Beatrice said. "How the worst moment of my life led to the best thing that ever happened to me." "I was thinking the same thing," Nathan said. "If Samuel Pritchard had not died, if you had not been stranded in Hamilton on that particular night, if I had not gone to town for supplies exactly when I did, we never would have met." "Fate," Beatrice said. "Or luck," Nathan replied. "Either way, I am grateful for it." "So am I," Beatrice said, snuggling closer to him. "So am I." The winter passed slowly but contentedly. Nathan and Beatrice settled into married life with surprising ease, as if they had been together for years rather than mere weeks. They worked together to keep the ranch running, Nathan handling the outdoor work while Beatrice managed the house. But they also helped each other, Beatrice often accompanying Nathan to check on the cattle, Nathan sometimes helping her with the heavier household tasks. In February, the worst of the winter storms hit. For 3 days they were snowed in, unable to leave the house except to tend to the animals in the barn. But instead of feeling trapped or claustrophobic, Beatrice found those days oddly magical. There was something intimate about being cut off from the rest of the world, just the two of them in their warm house while the storm raged outside. They spent those days talking, reading aloud to each other from Nathan's small collection of books, playing cards and making love. Beatrice discovered that marriage to Nathan was nothing like what she had feared it might be. He was patient and gentle, always concerned for her comfort and pleasure, and she found herself responding to him with an abandon that would have shocked her Boston sensibilities. When the storm finally passed and Nathan was able to dig them out, they ventured outside to assess the damage. Several sections of fence had blown down, and they had lost a few head of cattle to the cold, but overall the ranch had weathered the storm well. Nathan spent the next week repairing fences and tending to the surviving animals, while Beatrice worked to replenish their depleted food stores, baking bread and making preserves from the last of the root vegetables. March brought the first hints of spring. The days grew longer and slightly warmer, and patches of bare ground began to appear where the snow melted. Beatrice stood at the kitchen window one morning, watching Nathan work in the yard, and realized she was experiencing a happiness so profound it almost hurt. She also realized something else. She had missed her monthly courses, twice now. She had been too busy in content to notice at first, but now the signs were unmistakable. She was with child. The realization filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She wanted Nathan's baby, wanted to build a family with him, but pregnancy and childbirth were dangerous, especially out here far from doctors and hospitals. Her own mother had lost 2 babies before Beatrice was born, and the memory of her mother's grief over those losses haunted her. But she could not keep the news from Nathan. That evening after dinner, she took his hand and led him to sit by the fire. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Nathan looked at her with immediate concern. "What is wrong? Are you ill?" "No," Beatrice said quickly. "I am not ill. I am pregnant." For a moment Nathan just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming him from merely handsome to radiantly happy. "A baby," he said. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Beatrice said, her own smile matching his. "Sometime in the fall, I think. October or November." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "This is the best news," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The very best news." "You are not worried?" Beatrice asked. "About the danger?" "Of course I am worried," Nathan said, pulling back to look at her. "But I am also happy. We will be careful and we will get the doctor from Hamilton to come when it is time. You are strong, Bea. You survived losing everything and starting over in a strange place. You will survive this too." His confidence steadied her, and she allowed herself to feel the full joy of the moment. They were going to have a baby. She was going to be a mother, Nathan a father. Their little family was growing. As winter gave way to spring, Nathan became almost comically protective. He insisted that Beatrice rest more, that she not lift heavy things or work too hard. She found it both touching and exasperating, but she understood it came from a place of love and fear. He had lost so much in his life. He could not bear the thought of losing her or the baby. April brought warmth and rain, and the land transformed from brown and dormant to green and alive. Beatrice planted the garden she had dreamed of, working in the soft earth and marveling at how different her life was now compared to a year ago. Last April she had been in Boston, desperate and alone, barely surviving on the meager wages from her seamstress job. Now she was married, pregnant, planting vegetables in Nevada soil, planning a future that felt solid and real. Nathan hired a hand to help with the spring work, a young man named Tom who had drifted west looking for work. He was respectful and hardworking, and his presence meant Nathan did not have to work quite so hard, which in turn meant he had more time to spend with Beatrice. They would sit together in the evenings, Nathan's hand resting on her growing belly, feeling the baby move. Those moments were sacred to Beatrice, perfect little pockets of peace and happiness that she stored away in her memory like treasures. "What do you want to name the baby?" Nathan asked one evening in May. "I have been thinking about that," Beatrice said. "If it is a boy, I would like to name him after your father." "What was his name?" "Henry," Nathan said. "Henry James Garrett." "Henry Garrett," Beatrice said, testing the name. "I like it. And if it is a girl?" "My mother's name was Alina," Nathan said, "but she always went by Nora." "What about Nora Camden Garrett?" "Perfect," Beatrice said. She linked her fingers with Nathan's where his hand rested on her belly. "Henry or Nora, either way they will be loved." "More loved than any child has ever been," Nathan agreed. Summer came hot and dry, and Beatrice found the heat difficult as her belly swelled larger. She took to resting in the coolest part of the house during the hottest hours of the day, while Nathan and Tom worked to keep the cattle watered and fed in the drought conditions. It was a hard summer, the kind that tested ranchers and their livestock, but they managed. In August, Nathan rode to Hamilton and brought back the doctor, a gruff but competent man named Dr. Morrison. He examined Beatrice and pronounced both her and the baby healthy, then gave Nathan a list of instructions for when her time came. "Send for me when her pains start," Dr. Morrison said. "If the weather is good, I can be here in 2 hours. If it is not good, you may have to manage on your own, but I will leave you instructions." After the doctor left, Nathan looked shaken. "I do not think I can do this," he admitted. "If something goes wrong, if I lose you." "You will not lose me," Beatrice said firmly, taking his face in her hands. "I am stronger than you think, Nathan Garrett, and I am not leaving you. We are going to get through this together, and we are going to have a beautiful, healthy baby." September brought relief from the heat, the days growing cooler and more comfortable. Beatrice's belly was enormous now, and she moved slowly, her back aching and her ankles swollen. But she felt good, strong, ready for what was to come. The pain started on a clear October morning, exactly as Dr. Morrison had described. Nathan immediately sent Tom racing for Hamilton while he stayed with Beatrice, holding her hand and trying to hide his terror. The pains came and went, growing stronger and closer together, and by the time Dr. Morrison arrived in the afternoon, Beatrice was deep into labor. What followed were hours that stretched into forever, pain beyond anything Beatrice had imagined, Nathan's steady presence the only thing keeping her grounded. Dr. Morrison was competent and calm, giving instructions that Beatrice tried to follow through the haze of pain and exhaustion. And then, as the sun was setting and painting the sky brilliant orange and pink, she felt the baby slip free, heard the first wailing cry that announced new life. Dr. Morrison held up the infant, red and wrinkled and perfect. "A boy," the doctor announced. "A healthy boy." Beatrice fell back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face, while Nathan kissed her forehead and told her how wonderful she was, how proud he was, how much he loved her. Dr. Morrison cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Beatrice's arms. She looked down at her son's tiny red face, at his shock of dark hair and his little fists waving in the air, and felt her heart expand to hold this new overwhelming love. This was her child, hers and Nathan's, a tiny person who was part of both of them, a living symbol of their love. "Hello, Henry," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Nathan sat beside her on the bed, one arm around her shoulders, staring at his son with wonder. "He is perfect," he said. "You are both perfect, Doctor." Morrison stayed through the night to make sure both mother and baby were doing well. then departed the next morning with his fee and a hearty breakfast. Tom, who had been relegated to the barn during the delivery, came in to offer awkward congratulations before heading back to his work. The days that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Henry proved to be a hungry baby who wanted to nurse constantly, and Beatrice found herself in a fog of sleeplessness and hormones. But Nathan was wonderful, taking on every task in the house that he could manage, bringing her food and water, changing diapers, walking the floor with Henry when he cried. "I did not know you could be more perfect," Beatrice told him one night as he rocked their son back to sleep. "But watching you be a father, it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "I feel the same watching you be a mother," Nathan said softly. "You are amazing, Bea. I never knew I could love someone as much as I love you, and now I love you even more for giving me this gift." As October turned to November and then December, they settled into their new life as parents. Henry grew and thrived, becoming more alert and responsive with each passing day. He had Nathan's dark hair and Beatrice's blue eyes, and both parents agreed he was the most beautiful baby ever born. On a cold December evening, almost exactly a year after Beatrice had arrived in Hamilton, they sat together by the fire, Henry sleeping in a cradle Nathan had built with his own hands. Snow was falling outside, but inside all was warm and peaceful. "A year ago tonight," Beatrice said softly, "I was sitting on a bench in Hamilton, crying because my life was falling apart. And I was loading supplies into my wagon, having no idea my life was about to change forever," Nathan added. "You told me tears freeze in the December wind," Beatrice said, smiling at the memory. "You told me to let you warm me." "Best decision I ever made," Nathan said, pulling her closer. "Bringing you here, offering you help. I told myself I was being a good Samaritan, but the truth is, I think I fell in love with you the moment I saw you on that bench." "I thought you were going to be another mistake," Beatrice admitted. "Another man making false promises. But you were real, Nathan. You were the most real thing that ever happened to me." "We were meant to find each other," Nathan said. "Through all the tragedy and hardship, through Samuel Pritchard's death and the December cold, we were meant to find each other." "I believe that," Beatrice said. She looked around the room at the warm fire and the sleeping baby and the man she loved more than life itself. "This is my home, not because of the house or the ranch, but because of you, because of us." "Home," Nathan echoed, kissing the top of her head. "That is exactly what this is." The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered as Nathan proved himself to be a skilled and hard-working rancher. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Nora as planned, born in 1874, and another son, James, born in 1876. The house that had once felt large and empty was now full of life and laughter, the sounds of children playing and growing. Beatrice thrived in her role as wife and mother. She became known in Hamilton as a skilled seamstress, and she took on mending and sewing projects for other families, adding to their income. She also became involved in establishing a proper school in Hamilton, organizing other mothers to petition for a teacher and a schoolhouse. Nathan expanded the ranch, buying more land and cattle as their prosperity grew. Tom stayed on as a permanent hand, eventually marrying a girl from town and building a small house on the property. He and Nathan became close friends, working together to build something lasting. But through all the growth and change, the center of everything remained Nathan and Beatrice's love for each other. They still sat by the fire together in the evenings after the children were in bed, still talked and dreamed and planned. The passion that had ignited between them never faded, and they found new ways to show their love even as the years passed and their responsibilities grew. In the spring of 1880, Beatrice received a letter forwarded from Boston. It was from a distant cousin she barely remembered, informing her that an aunt had passed away and left Beatrice a small inheritance. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference. "What do you want to do with it?" Nathan asked when she showed him the letter. Beatrice thought about it carefully. 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, that money would have meant security, safety, a cushion against disaster. But now they had security. They had built it together through hard work and love. "I want to donate it to the school fund," she said finally, "so that children in Hamilton can have the education I had, the opportunities I had before everything fell apart. Maybe it will help some other girl avoid the desperation I felt." "That is a wonderful idea," Nathan said, and she could see the pride in his eyes. "You have such a good heart, Bea." "You taught me that having a good heart matters," Beatrice said. "You showed me kindness when I had nothing to offer you in return. Now I can pay that forward." The money went to the school fund, and by the fall of 1880, Hamilton had a proper schoolhouse and a qualified teacher. Henry started attending that fall, bright and eager to learn. Beatrice stood with Nathan and watched their son walk into the schoolhouse on that first day, and she felt a profound sense of completion. She had come full circle, from educated young woman in Boston to desperate mail-order bride to respected wife and mother helping to bring education to a frontier town. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. In 1882, a harsh winter took a heavy toll on the cattle, and they had to rebuild the herd. In 1883, Nora broke her arm falling from a tree, and they spent an anxious week nursing her through the pain and healing. In 1884, James caught scarlet fever, and they nearly lost him before the fever finally broke. Through it all, Nathan and Beatrice held onto each other. They had learned early in their marriage that love was not just the easy moments by the fire or the passion in the bedroom. Love was holding each other through fear and grief, was working together to solve problems, was choosing each other again and again, even when times were hard. In 1885, they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. Nathan had commissioned a beautiful wooden rocking chair from a craftsman in Carson City, having it delivered as a surprise. Beatrice had made him a quilt using fabric from all their years together, each square representing a memory or milestone. They sat together on the porch that anniversary evening, watching the sun set over the land they had built together, the children playing in the yard, and Beatrice felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "You ever regret it?" she asked Nathan. "Taking in a strange woman on a December night?" "Your life would have been simpler without me." "Simpler maybe," Nathan said, "but not better, never better. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Bea. You and our children and this life we have built. I would not change a single thing." "Not even the hard times?" Beatrice asked. "Especially not the hard times," Nathan said. "Those are what taught us how strong we are together. Those are what made us who we are." "I love you," Beatrice said, the words as true now as they had been 10 years ago. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I love you," Nathan replied. "My mail-order bride who was meant for someone else but found her way to me instead." As they sat there in the fading light, Henry came running up to the porch, followed by Nora and James. "Mama, Papa, can we have a story before bed?" Henry asked. "Of course," Beatrice said, making room for the children to pile onto the porch beside them. "What kind of story do you want?" "Tell us how you met," Nora said. It was her favorite story, one they had told many times but never seemed to tire of telling. "Well," Nathan began, winking at Beatrice. "It was a cold December night, and your mother was sitting on a bench in Hamilton, crying in the wind. And Papa came along and said, 'Tears freeze, let me warm you,'" Henry chimed in, knowing the story by heart. "That is right," Beatrice said, smiling at her children. "And he brought me here to this ranch and kept me safe. And I fell in love with him because he was kind and brave and good. And they got married and had us," James said, always eager to get to his part of the story. "The best part of the story," Nathan agreed, ruffling his youngest son's hair. They sat together as the stars began to appear, the family they had created against all odds, bound together by love and determination, and the simple grace of two people finding each other when they needed each other most. The children eventually went to bed, and Nathan and Beatrice remained on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the cool evening air. The ranch was quiet now, peaceful, the cattle settled for the night, the horses in the barn, everything secure and safe. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Beatrice asked. "When I asked why you were helping me?" "I said it was the right thing to do," Nathan recalled. "You said your mother taught you that we have an obligation to help those in need when we have the means to do so," Beatrice corrected. "And you were right. But you gave me so much more than help, Nathan. You gave me love. You gave me a home. You gave me a life worth living." "And you gave me the same," Nathan said. "I was existing before you came, just going through the motions. You taught me how to live again." They stayed there long into the night, talking and remembering, planning and dreaming, secure in the knowledge that whatever the future brought, they would face it together. More years passed, bringing more changes. Henry grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's sharp mind and kind heart. He went away to school in Carson City, studying to become a teacher. Nora became known for her skill with horses, able to gentle even the wildest Mustang. James showed an aptitude for numbers and business, helping Nathan expand the ranch operations even further. In 1892, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise after so many years. She was 41, old for childbearing, and both she and Nathan worried about the risks. But Dr. Morrison, now a close family friend, examined her and declared her healthy and strong. "You have good breeding hips," he said in his gruff way. "And you have had 3 healthy babies already. I see no reason why this one should be any different." And it was not. In the spring of 1893, Beatrice delivered another daughter, whom they named Eleanor Rose after Nathan's mother and the wild roses that grew along the creek. The older children doted on their baby sister, and Beatrice found herself falling in love with motherhood all over again. Nathan, now in his 40s with streaks of gray in his dark hair, was as tender with this new baby as he had been with Henry. Beatrice would sometimes catch him holding Eleanor and singing to her, the same songs he had sung to their other children, and her heart would swell with love for this man, who had saved her life in more ways than one. The turn of the century brought the automobile to Hamilton, and electricity came not long after. The Wild West they had known was changing, becoming more civilized, more modern. But some things remained constant. The land still required hard work and dedication. Family still mattered most. Love still endured. In 1905, Henry married a school teacher named Sarah, and they gave Nathan and Beatrice their first grandchild, a boy they named Nathan Henry. Beatrice held her grandson and marveled at the continuity of it all, how life flowed forward, how love multiplied rather than divided. Nora married a rancher from a neighboring property in 1908, combining the 2 ranches into a larger operation. James took over much of the day-to-day management of the Garrett ranch, allowing Nathan to finally slow down a bit, though he never fully retired. Eleanor grew up bright and spirited, the baby of the family who brought joy to everyone around her. She had her father's steadiness and her mother's determination, and watching her grow reminded Beatrice of all the gifts life had given her. In 1913, Nathan and Beatrice celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. All their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a party, and the house was full of noise and laughter and love. Late in the evening, after everyone else had gone to bed or home, Nathan and Beatrice sat on their porch in the rocking chairs they had accumulated over the years. 40 years, Beatrice marveled. How did we get to be this old? I do not feel old, Nathan said, though his hair was white now and his hands showed the wear of a lifetime of hard work. I feel lucky. I was thinking earlier, Beatrice said, about that girl who came west on a stagecoach, so desperate and afraid, I barely recognize her now. She is still in there, Nathan said, reaching over to take her hand. That strength and courage that got her through those hard times, that is still part of you. But now she has a family who loves her, a home that is truly hers, and 40 years of memories to sustain her. And a husband who has been her partner through everything, Beatrice added, who kept his promise to warm her on that cold December night and has been warming her ever since. Always, Nathan promised. For whatever time we have left, I will always keep you warm. They sat together as they had done so many times over the years, holding hands and watching the stars, secure in a love that had weathered every storm and only grown stronger with time. More grandchildren came, and then great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to prosper under James's management, and Henry became the principal of the Hamilton school system, fulfilling Beatrice's early dreams of bringing education to the area. Nora's combined ranches became one of the largest operations in the region. Eleanor went to college and became a nurse, returning to Hamilton to provide medical care to the community. In 1923, 50 years after that December night when they first met, Nathan and Beatrice sat together in their bedroom, looking through old photographs and letters, remembering. They were both in their 70s now, slower and frailer than they had been, but still very much in love. You ever wonder what would have happened if Samuel Pritchard had not died? Nathan asked. If he had been there to meet you that day. I try not to, Beatrice admitted. Because according to what you told me, my life with him would have been miserable. But more than that, it means I would not have had my life with you, and I cannot imagine that. I think about it sometimes, Nathan said. And I am ashamed to admit that I am grateful he died, because it brought you to me. That makes me a terrible person. No, Beatrice said firmly. It makes you human. And besides, you did not cause his death. You simply benefited from the circumstances it created. There is no shame in being grateful for the love we found. 50 years, Nathan said, shaking his head in wonder. Half a century with the woman I love. And I would take 50 more if we could have them, Beatrice said. But time is finite, and even the greatest loves must eventually face mortality. In the winter of 1925, Nathan caught pneumonia. Dr. Morrison, now retired and in his 80s himself, came to visit and could offer little beyond comfort. The new young doctor who had taken over his practice was called, and he tried everything modern medicine had to offer. But Nathan was 79 years old, and his body was worn out from a lifetime of hard work. Beatrice sat by his bedside day and night, holding his hand, talking to him, reminding him of all their years together. Their children took turns keeping vigil, and the house was full of family, all of them drawn together by their love for the man who had built this legacy. On a February morning, with snow falling softly outside the window, Nathan opened his eyes and looked at Beatrice with perfect clarity. I am not afraid, he said, his voice weak but steady. I have had a good life, the best life, because of you. You saved me, Beatrice said, tears streaming down her face. That night in Hamilton, you saved my life. And you saved mine, Nathan replied. Every day since then you have saved me, made me better, made me whole. I love you, Beatrice whispered. I will always love you. And I love you, Nathan said. In this life and whatever comes after, I will find you again, B. Somehow I will find you. He closed his eyes then, and an hour later, with his family surrounding him and Beatrice holding his hand, Nathan Garrett passed quietly from this world to the next. The grief was overwhelming. Beatrice had known for years that this day would come eventually, but knowing did not make it any easier to bear. She had spent more than half a century with Nathan, and now suddenly he was gone, and the world felt empty and cold without him. But she was not alone. Her children rallied around her, providing support and comfort. Henry moved back to the ranch temporarily to help manage things. Nora came every day to check on her mother. James handled all the business matters so Beatrice would not have to worry. And Alina simply sat with her mother, holding her hand and letting her cry. They buried Nathan on a hill overlooking the ranch, where he could watch over the land he had loved. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, testimony to the respect and affection Nathan had earned over his long life. People came from all over the region to pay their respects, and many shared stories of Nathan's kindness and integrity. In the days and weeks that followed, Beatrice slowly began to find her way through the grief. She would never stop missing Nathan, but she had too much to live for to give up. She had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who needed her. She had a legacy to protect and a family to nurture. She also had memories, 50 years of memories that no one could take from her. She remembered that first December night when Nathan had found her crying in the cold and offered her warmth. She remembered falling in love, the quiet domestic joy of their early marriage, the triumph of their first child's birth. She remembered hard times weathered together, celebrations shared, ordinary moments that had seemed insignificant at the time but now glowed in her memory like jewels. Beatrice lived for another 8 years after Nathan's death, surrounded by family and love. She saw Alina get married and have children. She held great-great-grandchildren in her arms. She watched the ranch continue to prosper under James's management, and took pride in Henry's continued work in education, and Nora's success with her ranching operation. She spent her final years writing down the story of her life with Nathan, wanting future generations to know about the love that had sustained them both. She wrote about Boston and the hard times after her parents' deaths. She wrote about the journey west and the crushing disappointment of finding Samuel Pritchard dead. She wrote about Nathan finding her on that December night, about his kindness and honor, about how they had fallen in love. She wrote about their marriage, their children, the ranch they had built together. She wrote about the joys and sorrows, the challenges and triumphs. But most of all, she wrote about love, about how love had transformed both their lives, how it had given them strength and purpose and joy. On a spring morning in 1933, Beatrice Camden Garrett passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82. She was laid to rest beside Nathan on the hill overlooking the ranch, where they could spend eternity together watching over the land and the family they had created. At the funeral, Henry read from his mother's memoir, sharing the story of that December night when two desperate, lonely people had found each other against all odds. There was not a dry eye in the congregation as he described Nathan finding Beatrice on that bench, as he recounted Nathan's words. "Tears freeze. Let me warm you." "My parents' love story was not conventional," Henry said, looking out at the assembled family and friends. "It started in tragedy and desperation, but they built something beautiful from that difficult beginning. They built a family, a legacy, and a love that lasted more than half a century. They taught us that love is not just passion or romance. The though they had plenty of both. Love is choosing each other every day. Love is working together through hard times. Love is building a life that matters. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. My mother wrote at the end of her memoir that she had no regrets, that every hardship she endured was worth it because it led her to my father, that if she could go back and change anything, she would not, because it might mean losing what they had together. That is the kind of love they shared. That is the legacy they left us. The family gathered at the ranch after the funeral, as they had done after Nathan's funeral 8 years earlier. The house that had once been a simple bachelor's dwelling was now a large, comfortable home full of history and memories. 4 generations of Garretts filled the rooms, talking and laughing and crying together, bound by the love story that had started it all. Eleanor, now in her 40s and a grandmother herself, stood on the porch where her parents had sat so many evenings together. She looked out over the ranch at the land her father had worked and her mother had helped him build into a prosperous operation. She thought about the story her mother had written, about how close she had come to not existing at all. If Samuel Pritchard had lived, if Beatrice had married him as planned, Eleanor would never have been born. None of them would have existed. Their entire family, all these people gathered here today, owed their existence to that December night when Nathan Garrett had offered warmth to a crying stranger. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, coming to stand beside his sister. "About how random it all was," Eleanor said. "How many things had to go exactly right for any of us to be here. If Pritchard had not died, if Papa had not gone to town that specific day, if he had not walked down that specific street at that specific time. But he did," James said, "and they found each other, and they built all of this." "They built a family," Eleanor said, "out of nothing but love and determination and hard work. That is what I want to remember, not the randomness or the luck, but the choice. They chose each other and they kept choosing each other for 50 years. And we are the result of that choice," James agreed. "Every one of us." Inside the house, Henry was showing his grandchildren the memoir Beatrice had written, reading them passages about their great-grandparents' courtship and marriage. The children listened with wide eyes, fascinated by this love story that had created their family. "Great-grandma came all the way from Boston?" one of the children asked. "She did," Henry confirmed. "On a stagecoach traveling for weeks to marry a man she had never met." "That is so scary," another child said. "It was," Henry agreed. "Your great-grandmother was very brave. She had lost everything and was taking a huge risk, hoping to find something better. And she did find something better, just not in the way she expected." "She found great-grandpa," the first child said. "Exactly," Henry said. "And he found her. And they loved each other so much that they created all of us." As the afternoon wore on and the family began to disperse, returning to their own homes and lives, the ranch settled back into quiet. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, the same colors that had painted the sky on that December evening so many years ago when Nathan and Beatrice's story began. On the hill overlooking the ranch, 2 headstones stood side by side. Nathan's read, Nathan James Garrett, 1846–1925. Beloved husband, father, and grandfather, he lived with honor and loved completely. Beatrice's read, Beatrice Camden Garrett, 1851–1933. Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she survived, she thrived, she loved. Between the headstones, someone had planted wild roses, the same flowers that grew along the creek, the flowers that Eleanor had been named for. They bloomed every spring, a living reminder of the love that had built a family and a legacy that continued to grow and flourish. The ranch itself went on, passed down through the generations. James's children took over its management, and their children after them. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but certain things were kept sacred. The fireplace where Nathan and Beatrice had sat so many evenings, the bedroom they had shared, the porch where they had watched the stars together. Beatrice's memoir was published by the family in 1935, 2 years after her death. It became a small sensation, this first-hand account of life in the Wild West, of a mail-order bride's journey, and of a love that had endured against all odds. It was taught in schools and read by historians, and treasured by romantics who believed in the power of love to transform lives. But for the Garrett family, it was more than just a book. It was their history, their foundation, the story of how they came to be. Every generation read it and passed it down, ensuring that Nathan and Beatrice's love story would never be forgotten. And on cold December nights, when the wind howled across the Nevada hills and snow fell softly on the ranch, the Garrett descendants would gather by the fire and tell the story again. About the mail-order bride who cried in the December wind. About the cowboy who said, "Tears freeze, let me warm you." About how that simple act of kindness had sparked a love that created a family and left a legacy that would endure for generations to come. It was a story about taking chances and finding hope in unexpected places. About how the worst moments can lead to the best things. About how love, real love, transforms everything it touches. And about how sometimes when we are at our lowest point, a stranger's kindness can save not just our life, but our very soul. Nathan and Beatrice's story lived on, proof that even in the harshest circumstances, even when all hope seems lost, love can find a way. Their descendants carried that lesson forward, passing it down through the generations, ensuring that the warmth Nathan offered on that cold December night never stopped spreading, never stopped transforming lives, never stopped reminding people that love, in the end, is what matters most.